Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and welcome back to the Commander's Briefing. We haven't done a Commander's Briefing for a long time, and today we're going to watch this video from the Austrian Armed Forces and their latest video. This is just 15 hours ago, called "The Ukrainian Offensive Has Failed. What's next?" So this is going to be an interesting watch. It's going to be in English, so I'm going to do a start stop. I will react to whatever is being said, and so for the first time in a long time, they are the real expert. They are the real military, and they are the real military expert. So I never claim that I'm any kind of expert, just to clarify. And most of the YouTubers out there, as much as they will call themselves experts, they are not experts. So these are the real experts because they are the real military. So let's see what the video is about.
Welcome to the Austrian Terrorism Military Academy. I'm Colonel Markus Reisner. I'm the head of the Department of Research and Development, and I'm currently the commander of the Honor Guard in Vienna. Today we will have a look at the so-called Ukrainian summer offensive and how the status actually is at the moment. We waited for a couple of months to come up with this video because we wanted to have some kind of final results, and after 195 days we actually can have already a first assessment about the offensive.
So you
Before
see
we start
50
with
on
a deep
December.
dive into the Ukrainian counteroffensive, we would like to show you two slides from our last brief at the beginning of June. The idea was to show in these slides what were the expectations referring to the Ukrainian counteroffensive. At that time, we assessed that there will be some kind of a final and decisive attack direction south in order to split the Russian occupied territory in two sections, the one in the southwest and the other one in the northeast, in combination with a further attack against the bridge over the Strait of Kerch.
So I want to cut in. So if you can see, there's only one arrow. So this is actually not the reality of what happens over in the Zaporizhzhia offensive. There's actually two different vectors, one at the Velika Novosibirsk sector and one in the Orikhiv sector. So to say that this is going to be like a one, you see there's only, they draw it in one arrow, you see the dotted lines going downwards. This is actually misleading, although this is actually what the plan is. And this explosion part, this is actually Mariupol, or in the region of Mariupol. So this is also not accurate. According to the Ukrainians, the target was Melitopol or Tokmak. And then the Velika Novosibirsk sector, where they're going down towards Berdyansk. So, there is some differing terminology or in terms of what they think is currently happening. And of course, this is June 2023, talking about hitting the Kerch bridge, which did happen, and then it failed after the Russians built up some kind of defensive systems. And so let's see.
The strategic effect the intended was to force, by isolating the Russians in the southwest, the Russians to the negotiation table. We also assessed that there are different options the Ukrainians can use when they will actually start their offensive. First, also deception, so trying to force the Russians to bring reserves to the northeast of the country. Maybe also to use an amphibious landing in the south, which was later not possible because of the destruction of the Novachakovo Dam. And of course, an attack against the bridge over the Strait of Kerch. Some things worked, others not. But finally, on the 4th of June, the Ukrainians started their attack along three main attack axes. One north of Tokmak and Melitopol, the other one north of Berdyansk and Mariupol, and the third one in the area of Bakhmut.
I want to come back to the previous slide. So he mentioned that the Ukrainian forces do some diversionary attack over in the Sumy Kharkiv region, which actually happened. They use special forces, foreign fighters, foreign legion to actually attack in limited capacity. The problem with this thing is that it wouldn't work because of satellite imagery, advanced surveillance drones and whatnot, unless the Ukrainians move a huge force to the northern border with Russia. The Russians are not going to get duped. They clearly know where the main line of attack is going to come from, because You can't really hide stuff nowadays, not so easily. So all those attacks, if you have noticed during those days when I was reporting about it, the fighting was mainly done by the Rosguardians, or basically like the police, or the National Guards. They are not the military. It's only one of the more serious penetration that the military was caught in, and even that it was finished within a few days. So in the kind of situation, I don't think you can call that a diversionary attempt. It's more like probing, or more like just disturbance. Just some kind of disturbance. And also Kakhovka Dam destruction only caused severe problems around the Dnipro River for like a few weeks, and after that it can be a legitimate attacking vector because the river becomes much more thinner. But of course the Ukrainians, we already see by now, they are actually doing it.
North of Berdyansk and Mariupol, and the third one in the area of Bakhmut. The expectations were high from the offensive. The idea was that especially the equipment which was delivered from the west, so modern main battle tanks like the Leopard or the Challenger, or infantry fighting vehicles like the CV-90 or the Bradley or the Marder, will make the difference. But the first hours showed that the Russian defense line were well prepared, and these were the pictures we actually saw in the beginning of the Ukrainian operation. And it was General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian forces, who stopped pretty much the operations because of the fact that the losses were so high. We would like to show you now a short video from the 47th Mechanized Brigade, the brigade which were spearheading the attack to the north of Tokmak and Melitopol, to give you an idea how the situation looked like when the Ukrainians tried to breach into the Russian defense lines.
So before he continues, I want to note, by day 4, he quoted that the Zaluzhny has seen enough, and basically, told his troops to pause the assault. And if you remember when I was reporting, by the 3rd day, I had already caught that the Ukrainian offensive has failed. So, because in a major kind of this kind of major offensive, the first few days is the key. You have to make a massive breakthrough within the first few days, because that's when you have all your equipments, everything is intact, you have the most number of troops at that point, because troops will only get lesser and lesser in an ongoing offensive. So within the first 3 days, you have to make a massive breakthrough and break the first line of defense, hitting the second line, putting pressure on the second line with the reinforcement coming out from the rear, and push through the second line into the third line. We did not see that happen. In fact, what we saw is, as what he said, by day 4, everything is over. Or maybe Zaluzhny actually watched DPA, and he kind of concurred with me that his offensive has failed. So he decided to pause the attack. Yeah. So let's watch on. I have to turn off because he used music, and then it might cause demonetization. So I kind of turn off the audio for now until the music is over. So I suspect that this video footages will also cause demonetization. So yeah, tough luck for me if that happens. Then I will just complain to them about the Austrian military showed this. I'm just reviewing. But no. Okay, stop. Wait. He's back. So
we now idea how such a having looked at the video, we now would like to give an idea how such a complex operation can look like. And therefore we use a manual from the US Army, and this manual describes in detail what kind of capabilities you need when you would like to conduct a successful breaching operation in order to break through to an enemy defense line. So there are certain terms which are important. The first term is the term suppress. So it's important that you have protection forces which are reducing the enemy forces on the other side. But this hasn't worked quite well. The next term which is important is the term of obscure. So you have to hide your forces to the enemy by using, for example, smoke or smoke grenades. Also here, smoke was used, but only 3% of all the fire missions of the Ukrainian side were actually firing smoke. The next term is the term secure. You have to isolate the area where you would like to conduct a breach, and you have to make sure that the enemy will not be able to use his mobile reserves against you. Also this just in a few cases worked because the Russians were using certain assets from the distance, like helicopters, but especially mobile anti-tank teams which were working on the Ukrainian troops. And the last term which is important is the term reduce, because you have to physically reduce all the obstacles from the other side, like the minefields. You have to conquer and overcome the tank trenches, and of course the Dragon T's and all the other obstacles in order to breach into the Russian defense lines. And the fact is that if you don't have all these four capabilities and terms fulfilled, you will be not able to attack, and this is what actually happened at the beginning of the Ukrainian offensive at three certain parts of along the front line.
So basically he's saying that the entire offensive failed right at the beginning, because basically you don't even have a green tick in any of the options. And it was very clear, because this is always going to be the case, because the Zaporizhzhia line, which the Ukrainians choose to attack, is the most heavily defended line in the entire of the Ukraine war. And this has been criticized by many observers, particularly also by me. I'm saying that there is way better options though than to just attack the most heavily defended line. The Russians clearly don't want you to go there, and they defended it as hard as they did. So let's watch on.
Let us look once again a little bit in detail on all the different capabilities both sides had. Let's start first with the Russian side. So the Russians had a variety of different assets they were using. Actually minefields, Dragon T's, concertina wire, mobile anti-tank troops, local fire support like mortars, but also mobile reserves like heavy mechanized units which were on standby and were used against the Ukrainian side. But most important, they had significant combat support, especially artillery and rocket artillery, and of course the air domain, because they were using their helicopters from a safe distance and ground attack aircraft, and they had sufficient drones which they were using for reconnaissance, and of course also as kamikaze drones against the Ukrainian troops. On the other side, the Ukrainians were also prepared to conduct this breaching operation. They had, of course, elements which they used to reduce the enemy obstacles. They had the breaching force consisting of main battle tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, and they also had combat support like artillery and also rocket artillery, but they were completely missing the air component. So there were no attack helicopters, no attack aircraft, and of course there were also no special weapon systems like ground-to-ground rockets like ATACMS, which were not delivered at that time. And of course the number of drones they were able to use were significantly lower than the Russian side.
Okay, so that is a few very major points. Firstly, I will correct that it's not that there is no combat helicopters or ground attack aircraft on the Ukrainian side. There is in insufficient number, and many of them got shot down over the operations to try to support the troops. And then over the Zaporizhzhia front, all this also was used, but it was not at the number that the Russians have. And there's a weird thing also, if you heard it, he's very pro-Russia. No, just joking. He said that the Russians have more drones than the Ukrainians. I mentioned that before, but this is the first time that we are hearing from a real military expert saying that's the case. Austrian armed forces. So they say that the Russians have more drones. I didn't say that. Actually, I did say that, but I'm corroborated. So let's see.
The result was that there were tactical successes, like the Ukrainians managed to occupy certain strong points along the defense lines like Rapotinia and Verboe, but they weren't able to breach into the defense lines or go or break through direction to the south. And if you compare the results on a bigger scale, then we can see that to the north of Tokmak and Melitopol, there was only a breach of about 8 to 10 kilometers. East of it, to the north of Berdyansk and Mariupol, the breach was about 12 kilometers. And also in Bakhmut, the results were very moderate. And compared to the distance from the breaching area to the Azov Sea, you can actually see that the results were very minor compared to the intended operational result and the strategic effect, which was the plan from the Ukrainian side. When we look at the defense line from the Russian side, then we can see that it was a very complex system of different defense lines. So there was a combat outpost line, which was...
So let's take a look. So this is Robotine. I'm not sure if you can see. Robotine, Verbove, and then this Pelivske, Novoprokopivka, and further south, don't even have to talk about it because the Ukrainians never reached it. The Ukrainians basically hit the first line of defense. They went through the first line. You can see all these dotted lines. This is the first line of defense, which is why I keep mentioning. The Ukrainians hit and got through the first line, but then they cannot manage to break through towards the second line because there is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, depending on which direction of attack that you go through. There is different number of lines of defense, and some of the lines of defense merge and then split up depending on where you are. And the Ukrainians basically didn't only captured Robotine. They hit towards Verbove, they can't break through. They hit between, they can't break through. And Novoprokopivka, don't even talk about it. They did not even get in.
Was of course breached by the Ukrainians. There was a defense line which even was assisted by a second defense line in depth, and there were further defense lines to the south of Rapotinia, and even the defense line around the main capitals. So what the Ukrainians managed is to break through the combat outpost line and to break into the first defense line, but the attack finally was stopped in that area.
See, he said exactly what I said.
So the question is, what happened to the Ukrainian game changers? We have already discussed the role of the mechanized force, but we should not forget that significant different weapon systems were not available, either because they were not delivered or the quantity was low. So the ground-launched small diameter bomb was not available. It's still not available. It might be delivered next year. On the other side, of course, the Su-24M was adapted for the use of Storm Shadow and Scalp, but it's not a problem of the quantity of those air-to-ground weapon systems. It's a question of the quantity of the available platforms like the Su-24M to be used against the Russian side. And the third very important aspect was that the so-called brigades of the offensive, the 9 brigades which were more or less prepared by the West, plus the 3 brigades which were prepared by the Ukrainians, obviously had not the correct training status to fulfill this very complex task.
What? This is a pro-Russian talking point. The pro-Russian side, and including the neutral side, including like DPA, have been talking about this, and a lot of, especially from the pro-Russian sources, they have been saying that these troops, some of them are woefully undertrained. Some of them only trained 1 month. Some trained only 2 weeks. Some only had 3-time range. Some only have 1-time range. Range means you go to the range to fire your rifle to learn how to use, how to aim, how to shoot. So yeah, he said it. No, he said it. I didn't say it. I didn't say. Actually, I did say it. No.
I was already referring to an article in the Washington Post. The article in the Washington Post lined out in detail the problems, especially in the shaping phase of the operation. So there was a different approach on how to conduct the operation, especially from the US side and from the Ukrainian side. While the US side emphasized that there should be one main effort, so one attack direction to the city of Tokmak and Melitopol, the Ukrainians insisted to follow actually 3 attack axes. So one in direction of Melitopol, the other one in direction of Berdyansk and Mariupol, and the third attack axis along Bakhmut. So the Russian side had the advantage that they were able to more or less fight against Ukrainian troops on 3 different parts of the front line. which, and this is the US argument, made it difficult for the Ukrainians to break through because they were not actually having all their troops at one certain point available, and in order to have the force actually to break through in direction south. After
that was shocking, because I don't read that much mainstream media, so no, that was a bit shocking to me. So let's go back to the slide. Am I going to see the slide? Okay, so let's read the slide. So according to this by Washington Post for the 4th of December, so they say that they held 8 major tabletop war games to build the campaign plan, and they miscalculated that the Ukrainians aren't the Western style fighting force. Honestly, to be honest, if you put a NATO force to fight without the air force support, without the super long range HIMARS, it's going to be the same result. No amount of training can make you bulletproof. You can train 10 years with no 20 packs in your stomach. You are still going to be killed by one bullet. So it's not a matter of they overestimated the capability of the Ukrainians. I feel like they underestimated the capability of the Russians. I think that is the main problem. It's not the other way around. I think the Ukrainians fought as well as they could under the kind of stupid situation that they put themselves into to attack a totally defended line. They overestimated themselves in the sense that they underestimated the enemy. So there are rumors saying that they are expecting that the Russians, upon seeing the Leopard tanks, will run away. This is rumors, but the thing is that the Russians basically was looking forward to meeting the Leopard tanks because they wanted money, So given the anti-tank weapons that they have, they can take out a Leopard tank, and that's exactly what had happened. So and then this is another problem. The US and Ukrainian officials disagreed over strategy, tactics, and time. So the Pentagon wanted a later offensive, begin in mid-April, and then the Ukrainians hesitated, saying that they are not ready. Didn't the offensive started in March? Oh no, that was not. That was the leak. Yeah. So the offensive was actually even shorter than I thought. Then I remembered. So anyway, regardless what it is the same. Yeah, the Russians the line was already very strengthened. It's a very, very strong line. So to assault or not assault, it wouldn't have made any difference. If they do it later, it's still going to be the same. Probably difference in terms of manpower, which the Russians did struggle a bit at the Orikhiv sector. They need to bring in reinforcement. So, but yeah, similarly, they see they are overconfident about a mechanized frontal assault. They concluded that in the best case, they reached the Sea of Azov and cut off the troops within 60 to 90 days. So this clearly shows that they have underestimated the defensive lines. The West have not fought such a integrated, concentrated defense line since World War II. There is, or maybe, not even Vietnam War, to be honest. Maybe Korean War. So this kind of a heavy defense line have not appeared for a long time in the military history since World War II or Korean War. So this new generation of generals or commanders have underestimated how effective it can be. The Russians learned it right at the beginning of the war. Within the first 6 months, the Russians have basically thrown out all their military doctrines that they have learned and written since their operations during the Syrian war. So the Russians entered Syria, right? So to help out the Syrian against the rebels as well as ISIS, and from there they learned all this mobile warfare and whatnot, similar to what the Americans did, and they wrote new ways of fighting war. Immediately within 6 months, probably 3 months, the Russians throw out everything and dig out all the World War II level, the Soviet Union era doctrines, and reform the military along the line of this World War II style, large scale warfare, and then they modified it based on the realities of modern warfare. So the Americans are learning this, with Ukrainian troops. So clearly, I'm not sure if the Americans are going to be changing their doctrines anytime soon. But this also shows that in a NATO-Russian war, yeah, it's going to be quite disastrous. So anyway, another line is that the Americans advocated for a focused assault along the southern axis, but the Ukrainians believe they have to attack in 3 distinct points. So this is interesting, and I agree with the Americans that they should have concentrated on 1 point. So yeah, spreading out the forces makes no sense. 12 brigades is not that much. No, to be honest, it's not that much in the scale of the war of the Ukraine war. So yeah, both sides have wrongs, but it also shows that the Ukrainians are not the one making the decisions entirely. The NATO side is actually pulling a lot of strings, but also we can see that it is the Ukrainians that make the final decisions that but of course that also bring them to some terrible place. So let's continue to watch
in order to have the force actually to break through in direction south. After the initial stage of the Ukrainian offensive failed, General Soluzhny ordered to switch tactics. So at the beginning of the offensive, the Ukrainians tried to attack from, and if you compare that with a chessboard, from one field to the other one. But they were trapped in a mix of Russian anti-tank weapons, Russian helicopters, minefields, and other assets. So what they did is actually to switch the tactic in a different way, and therefore we have to understand a little bit the terrain in Ukraine, which is very, very flat, and the different terrain features are split in between by tree lines. So the idea of the Ukrainians was not to attack from one field to the other one, but to follow these tree lines in between the fields and attack from one field to the other. And that brought success, but in a very, very slow motion and with high losses.
Wait. That's ridiculous. the Ukrainian, this is the Ukrainian army fighting in Ukrainian-led terrain, and they do not know how to fight. So it would not make a lot of sense. It's probably more like they already know that this is the way to fight, because that's literally the only way to fight. You can't really go into the open and die. So the only is either the NATO gave them very bad ideas about storming, doing a tank rush through the open field, or the Ukrainians are overconfident and do a tank rush through the open field. Clearly, you should be fighting along the tree lines. If you play computer games, you probably would know. It makes no sense. But anyway.
After we have looked at the tactical and operational challenges, we also have to have a look at the strategic outcome of the offensive. And this map shows very clearly how the success was from the Ukrainian side. You can actually see that along the 3 main attack axes, so north of Tokmak and Melitopol, north of Berdyansk and Mariupol, and in the area of Bakhmut, the success was very limited. So 8 to 10 kilometers in the central area, or 10 to 12 kilometers, and very limited results in the area of Bakhmut. On the other
side, I just want to add on a bit. It looks really sad. When you look at the map. Just now earlier, when he showed the whole of Ukraine map, it was very obvious. When you put it out like this, it's actually quite depressing. That after they spent 12 brigades of attacking. Of offensive brigades, and that's all that you actually achieve. Is depressing. Don't you think it's very depressing? After spending this much equipment and manpower, this is what you got. How to fight on this war? I have no idea.
On the other side, the Russians also had success because they also were occupying certain parts along the front line. But the problem is that the brigades of the offensive, the 9 brigades which were equipped by the West and the 3 brigades which were equipped by the Ukraine, those brigades of the offensive are now worn out. So they are not available anymore, and they are split along the whole front line, like the 47th Mech Brigade, which was spearheading the attack on the 4th of June and is now actually was transferred from the central area to Avdiivka because the pressure there is very high against the Ukrainian troops. Again, we have to look into the past to get an idea how a successful operation can look like actually. And there is one example which is a very good example because it shows how important the different branches of armed forces are. And this is the example of the Operation Cobra in summer 1944 in Normandy. That was the breakout of the Allied forces from the bridgeheaders along the landing beaches and the push into the depths of the French countryside. And the beginning of Cobra was the initial phase, a massive bombardment of the German positions along more or less the forward line of own troops, and the massive Allied bombardment resulted in high losses of the German forces, in this case the Panzerlehr division, which was more or less deployed along the forward line of own troops, and the Americans were able to break through with 3 armored divisions to the south and to the southwest. So we can actually see that the difference was made especially by this bombardment at the beginning of the offensive. And those air assets the Ukrainians had not available at the beginning of their offensive at the beginning of June at this year. Why?
Wait. I know he's the expert. No, I know he's the expert, but you cannot use the World War II tactic in a modern day warfare, because if you do a tank rush today, individual infantry squad will wipe out the tank rush. In those days, infantry squads can't take out a tank. You need an anti-tank gun to take out a tank, or you need other tanks to take out a tank. Even the Air Force, if you have the fighter during World War II, you do have helicopters, you have fighters, you do have guided missiles. So even for diving bombers, like the Jonker, I think it's a Jonker. I'm not sure what's the I think it's Jong 88, something like that. So the Germans have dive bombers, but even the dive bombers can't accurately destroy tanks, and they can only take out maybe at most 2 tanks if they are super accurate, and which is why a tank rush in World War II works. They can storm through a front line, and the infantry can't really do much. They don't have that much weaponry. The RPG of those days is just not good enough, not necessarily good enough to penetrate and destroy a tank. So you need tank versus tank, you need anti-tank weapons. So a tank rush can break through. In modern day, a tank rush will just get wiped out by anti-tank guided missiles, and even by simple thing like RPG, it can be very devastating. So I just want to highlight that.
And from week to week, it was becoming more and more clear that there is no real Ukrainian success or breakthrough. On the other side of the hill, on the Russian side, morale rose. And also here we can see that the Russian is using in its propaganda elements from the so-called Great Patriotic War in the Second World War, where the Soviet soldier fought successfully the German Tiger tank, like today, where the Russian soldier fought successfully the German Leopard tank or the American Bradley. And that brings me to the point, because the narrative until now was that the Russian soldier is not able to fight equally to the Ukrainian side. And this is a narrative we have to rethink, because the biggest mistake you can do is actually to underestimate the enemy. And I give you another example here from military intelligence from Great Britain, because the Brits are admitting here actually that especially the Russian air defense is quite successful, not only against the Ukrainian Air Force, but also against certain air-to-ground or ground-to-ground systems, like the HIMARS and the GMLRS rocket, or of course the Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles, which at a certain scale are shot down by the Russian side. And the Russian...
So you heard it from the military expert that HIMARS missiles can be shot down. So it's not Russian propaganda, it's Austrian propaganda. No.
Russians are adapting in a very simple and successful manner by, for example, using old bombs of a weight of 500 to 1,000 or even 1,500 kilograms, which they adapt, and from a so-called dump bomb they are able to make out an intelligence bomb, which they actually can use from a safe distance and use against the Ukrainians.
So this is for those that are watching the SIPREP on the DPA War channel, you'll probably hear me say the FAB bomb, FAB bomb. So this is the FAB bomb that I'm always talking about.
you can actually see here on this picture, where a Su-34 released 4 of these UMPK bombs. And of course, it's not only those bombs which are inflicting heavy damage on the Ukrainians, but it's especially also the arsenal of the Russians when it comes to cruise missiles and ballistic rockets, because also here we have to admit that the production rate of the Russian side has increased significantly. And to give you an idea of the result of those attacks, we would like to show you a video where you can actually see the impact of those UMPK bombs against the staging areas of the Ukrainian side.
Oh shit, I forgot about the music. Damn, this is going to be demonetized. So anyway, the FAT 500 means 500 kg bombs. So in case...
Well, the Ukrainian side is in desperate need of certain weapon systems. And after several months, and when it was clear that the Ukrainian success was not actually like intended, the Americans delivered a certain weapon system to give the Ukrainians the possibility to go into the offensive, to have a momentum again.
The
and
video
that weapon system was the Army Tactical Missile, which was delivered in an amount of between 20 to 30 pieces to the Ukrainians. And of course, the Ukrainians needed those weapon systems to fight against certain assets of the Russian side. And one of these certain assets was, of course, the Russian helicopters. So these ATACMS were used against a Russian airfield with cluster warheads, and immediately you were able to see what kind of a difference it made when weapon systems are available which are in need for the Ukrainian side, because several helicopters were not even destroyed but even damaged on the Russian side. And these tactical and operational assessments bring us to the point that we have a stalemate in the conflict. And General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, just recently in an article very clearly stated that there is not this kind of deep and beautiful breakthrough. No, there is a stalemate actually. And one of the things which is behind this stalemate is the situation that both sides are able actually to observe what the other side is doing. Why is this possible? Because there is a so-called transparent battlefield, because hundreds of drones are able to observe each side. So you can see actually which side is staging forces and which side is going from the staging into the maneuver, because those drones not only can observe these actions, but they are also used against these staging areas or against the maneuver force.
Remember in the early part of the video what I said? It's impossible to do a diversionary attack with a fake and smaller force, because everything can be seen. No, you can't hide anything.
And there is a certain type of weapon which is very successful used on both sides, and this is the so-called first-person view drone, which is a very simple and cheap asset to be used against even heavy equipment like a Leopard or Challenger tank. Those first-person view drones are used by both sides. So the Ukrainians are using those drones, but also the Russians are using them. The problem is that the Russians are able to actually produce them on the industrial scale, like we can see here. And in the next video, we'd like to show you how it looks like when one of these first-person view drones actually is attacking a heavy main battle tank, in this case a Leopard.
So you heard it from the military expert himself that the Russians are producing the drones. So in case there's any doubt, the Ukrainians are probably also producing, but it's not at the level, not in the kind of industrial scale that the Russians are doing, because Ukraine, basically the infrastructure, everything is at risk of attack, and then of course they lose a lot of manpower, a lot of talents and industrial capabilities. They don't have the money, they have the resources, while the Russians do not have this problem. So which is why the Russians have totally intact military industrial complex. They can actually produce this kind of thing, and in fact this is not even considered military. These just drones, and then they can just produce the spare parts, just build it up together very quickly. Yeah, so let's watch, but I need to turn off the music.
Not only the production of these first-person view drones which makes a difference, it's also the case that the military-industrial complex of the Russians are able to produce very capable weapon system like the so-called Lancet kamikaze drone. Because this drone gives the Russians the possibility to act deep behind the Ukrainian front lines. They actually use a system of hunter-killer drones. So there are hunter drones who do the reconnaissance and killer drones like the Lancet who are working on certain assets of the Ukrainian side deep behind the battlefield. We would like to give you one example which shows how tricky the situation for the Ukrainian side is, because in this video you can actually see the use of a Lancet drone against two high-value assets. One is a Su-25 ground attack aircraft and the other one is a MiG-29 fighter plane.
So, I think this was the one that they say that is not real, or is it this one? The previous one where they say that it's actually just a fake, no, because of the way how the plane structure with the engine is different. So, and these are all very far away from the front.
General solution is that the war is at a stalemate, and that means that the war goes on. So now let us look at the front line at these 1,200 kilometers, and let us look along the front line in detail in certain sectors what's going on there. So first of all, we can assess that, like it was in last winter, the Russians try to force the Ukrainians to use their tactical and operational reserves along the whole front line.
Just one interesting thing to note is that the naming of the front line is uncanny, because in my reporting, I come up with the name of the front line myself, like the Kupiansk front, the Svetove front, the Bakhmut front, Kremina front, Ben. And interestingly, it seems to gel with most of the reportings from different sides. They all call it more or less the same name, which is, I find that very, very interesting, because I'm not the expert, I'm not the expert.
They also try to use or consume already the Ukrainian strategic reserves, because the Ukrainians are trying to prepare new brigades in order to have the possibility for a new offensive in spring or summer next year. So let us start at the northeast of the front line. In the area of Kupiansk and Svatove, we can see increased Russian attacks in order to press the Ukrainians from the front line direction west behind the so-called Oskol River. In the area of Bakhmut, the Ukrainians lost all the terrain they won at the beginning of the offensive, to the north of Bakhmut at Kromovo and to the south at Klishevka. To the south of it, the Russians were suffering high losses. The Russians tried already several times to encircle Avdiivka, but heavy losses were inflicted from the Ukrainian side on the Russian side. Nevertheless, the Russians managed to capture pretty much Marinka, and of course they also increased their attacks along the Ugledar-Urozhaine part of the front line, and in Urozhaine, which was one of the main axis of attacks of the Ukrainians, the Russians were not even able to stabilize the front line, but they also were able to advance at least a couple of hundred meters. To the west and in the south, the situation is a little bit similar. In Rapotinie, also the Russians were able to stabilize the front line and go into the attack and occupied certain terrain, which was actually occupied before or liberated by the Ukrainian side. The success story from the Ukrainians at the moment is still the bridgehead at Grinki, where the Ukrainians try to, by using amphibious assault forces, land on the other side of the river. The main...
Wait. Before he carry on, success story? This is a calamity. How can you call this a success story? This is a calamity. The military expert should know better, right? If you have a beachhead and you don't break out, that is just a kill zone. It's not a beachhead. It's just a kill zone.
The main task of this operation is especially to show in the information domain that there is still the momentum on the Ukrainian side, and of course to force the Russians to use their tactical and operational reserves in order to at least block the Ukrainian forces in that area. A real success the Ukrainians had in the Black Sea until today, because in the Black Sea the Ukrainians were able to force the Russian naval forces from the west direction, the center, or even the east. They were successful because they used a combination of unmanned maritime systems against the ships of the Black Sea, but also the Su-24M and the Scalp and Storm Shadow air-to-ground missiles, and that resulted in a significant loss of Russian vessels and even a submarine which was destroyed by the Ukrainian side.
So just to add, so as you can see in terms of the events, so the submarine and this LST, they are both in dock. They are under repairs, and then the Storm Shadows are basically hit and cause massive destruction of these two vessels. It's unclear if the Russians will really want to repair them. Some of the other ones. So this LST, this is March 2022. As you can see, this happened much earlier. After Berdyansk was captured by the Russian forces, they started to resupply. They used the LST to send in supplies including humanitarian aid as well. So, and then the Russians become very complacent. Toskar-U was actually launched at Berdyansk and then caused massive destruction, causing massive fire. So this three LST was taken out of action pretty much. And then Neptune, the Moscow is the biggest loss of the Russians over this entire conflict in terms of the naval losses, because the Neptune anti-ship cruise missile came out of a surprise. They just suddenly appear in the battlefield, sinking the Moscow, and then the Russian Navy as a result retreated entirely from the northern part of the Black Sea away from Ukraine, because they cannot risk another ship getting destroyed by these cruise missiles. But Moscow is actually a very old ship, so just have to justify that. And other ones are not particularly important. This rescue tug, presumably sunk by Harpoon. I think this is actually around Snake Island, I believe. And I think the this two is actually destroyed by this surface drone, the suicide drone. So the Novorossiysk one was actually it was actually in port and then it got hit, I believe. The one at Sevastopol, this was attacked, but most of this attack at Sevastopol was repelled. Those drones are mostly destroyed. So this is one of the rare cases that actually got a hit. And the last one by Storm Shadow at Kerch. This one I'm not very familiar. I think I missed this news. So let's see.
On the strategic level, we have to consider once again that the next winter will be very difficult for the Ukrainian side, because the Russians, and this is what we expect, are increasing again their attacks against the critical infrastructure. In the last winter, there was a already devastating result of the Russian attacks against the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. It's said by Ukrainian officials that between 50 to 60% of the Ukrainian critical infrastructure was destroyed. The Ukrainians managed to repair about 10 to 15%, but now it's a question, will the Ukrainians be able to secure the remaining 50% over the next winter? Especially when we see that the Russians started again to use their Shahid drones, the old version and even a modern version which is quite faster and which makes it quite difficult for the Ukrainian air defense to fight against them. And of course, when we also look at all the different cruise missiles and rockets they actually are using.
I just want to add, I don't remember seeing the Shahed 238 being reportedly used in the Ukraine war. So this is, if you see this is a jet engine version. So this is a propeller version. So I kind of doubt. I don't remember seeing this being mentioned to be used. The 131 or 136 is actually very slow. But that gives the Ukrainian soldiers on the ground a lot of fun. They can do turkey shoot. They can shoot it down, trying to use machine gun, and clearly not realizing that their rifles only have a 400-meter range. So anyway, yeah, let's watch.
Of course, when we also look at all the different cruise missiles and rockets they actually are using. And here we should not forget that there is a high intensity of attacks every day in Ukraine, because in this map, for example, from September to November, we can see the different tracks of assets from the Russian side used against the Ukrainians. And also here, when we just look at the Shahid attacks, then you can see that the Russians are aiming at the depths of the country, because there they actually think that the main supply dumps of the Ukrainians are located. And of course, they also are hunting for the very precious Su-24M, which the Ukrainians use as a carrier platform for the Storm Shadow and Scout missiles. Let us not forget that the center of gravity of the Ukrainians is the resistance of the West. And here we can see a significant drop when it comes to the assistance. So in the last months, there was only a minor amount of assistance which was delivered to the West. And this is especially significant when we look at the American side, because it's especially the Americans who make the difference. And the Ukrainians still need heavy weapons like tanks, infantry.
I feel triggered for the Ukrainians. They say that he said that it's the Americans that make the difference. It's not the Ukrainians. Yeah, American propaganda.
Fighting vehicles, artillery pieces, if they want to go into the offensive next year again. And it's not only the delivery of the systems which is important, but also it's a question of how many soldiers are still available and how many soldiers is Ukraine able to mobilize for the defense of its country and in order to go into the offensive again maybe next year. And that brings...
Wait. I want to go back to the previous slide. I want to take a look at this graphic. So this is the production or the supply. So the Ukrainians actually get 28 tanks per month. Sure or not? Leopard 1, I don't think I haven't even seen the Abrams at the front line. Leopard 1's, yes. So maybe the 28 is based on the Leopard tanks because there's no more Challenger 2 being provided. T-72 is basically all what that's remained. There's also not given more Leopard 2s. This Straff 122 is limited. I don't think they're giving them much more. Everything else here is all, there's nothing new. No more new ones that will be given. So they say there's still 35 per month. Let's see. And artillery system, similar situation. The West is not giving them anymore. So I think this is just a total divided by 12 kind of thing. So towed artillery, I don't think they have much more as well. I don't think they are being given. Totally no more HIMARS or M270 given because these are very expensive weaponries. Of course, the missiles are very limited in terms of shells and whatnot. And if you look at the number of production from the Russian side, basically this NATO expert, this Austrian armed forces is saying that the Russians basically have outproduced whatever the West can give to Ukraine. Over 100 tanks per month, over 100 infantry fighting vehicles per month, over 50 artillery systems in terms of the self-propelled artillery, over 200 towed artillery, and also more than 23 missile artillery. And then of course they supposedly have 1,000 more. They can produce more than 1,500 Shaheeds, more than 800 missiles version, different missile version, and 3 million, 3.3 million shells. They calculated Russian production, North Korean production, and Iran. So Americans can produce 1 million shells and 500,000 from EU and UK. So given this kind of production values, I'm not sure. Of course, they did mention that these are from storage warehouse and manufactured in 2023 within the 10-month period. I think you get the gist of the whole situation. I do have to explain too much more.
The defense of its country, and that brings me to the final slide, and I would like to quote once again the Ukrainian President Zelensky, who said, "We are not retreating." Of course, there wasn't this kind of deep and beautiful offensive like General Zaluzhny said, but at least we are not going back and we are holding the terrain. And of course, it is the will of the Ukrainian people to fight further against the Russian troops in Ukraine. That concludes my brief. I would like to say thank you very much for listening, and I would like to say goodbye till the next time.
So this is the whole video by this Austrian armed forces. So far, to be honest, among all the videos coming out on the pro-West or pro-Ukrainian kind of position, I think the Austrian armed forces is the best in terms of talking about the realities on the ground. So I have seen the Austrian armed forces videos before, and I think from the the one or two or videos that I've seen so far about the Ukraine war, because they don't always talk about Ukraine war. Like if you look at the videos, they have other stuff as well. You know, Ukraine war is not their preoccupation. As you can see from the report, the last report of the Ukraine offensive, or the Ukraine war report, was half a year ago. So they clearly did not want to say anything, because it can be, you know, they can slap themselves in their faces, on their own face, if they say something totally wrong. And so far, the Austrians, unlike the British intelligence is totally nonsense. They just write a lot of rubbish. The Austrian armed forces, their reports on the Ukraine is pretty good. They are very realistic. Clearly, they are pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine. They are very pro-Ukraine, but they are also very realistic. And so this I definitely will give my respect to the, you know, the Austrians for, you know, being logical, because they are the military. You know, as a military, you need to be very pragmatic, very practical. You cannot live on hopes and copes. You know, you cannot have hopium and copiums in terms of your analysis. And clearly, this guy is a very high-ranking guy. I think there's 3 stars here. I wonder if he's a general. So anyway, thank you for watching. Do let me know in the comments what you think. I will have to edit out the music, so you know, so yeah, you probably may not hear the music when you watch this. And do press the like button, subscribe. And for those that want to follow DPA's coverage of the Ukraine war, the coverage is on DPA War channel. No, because I have to separate, so that the main channel we can cover other stuff, or else everything will be just washed away by the by the daily reports from the war. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next update.